Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in this, the Clown Decade, the decade where things are only going to get worse before they get better. If you would like to keep up with all things Clown Decade, please do subscribe to the channel and of course become a channel member. Right, today what caught my eye was this article in The Times. Curriculum review, more diversity and fewer exams at GCSEs. Labour has been accused of education vandalism by the Tories after a long review was published. Well, those of you that know me very well will know that I do appreciate the Times and a lot of their reporting. However, when it comes to publicly available reports, I prefer to go straight to the source. So let's do that. Building a world-class curriculum for all, final report. And this is after a year of reviewing the curriculum as it stands, because we have a national curriculum in Britain brought about by Margaret Thatcher, and it's arguably the worst thing she did. Because ultimately I'm, well, more of a free market leaning guy when it comes to education. Having a free market with the curriculum, yes, you will have poor standards in education in places, but most of all people will be trying to reach and ascertain the best education for kids that parents want for their kids. And parents typically want their kids to have educations that is going to get them ahead in life rather than, well, behind in life, which is what we see for a fair few people, unfortunately. So the forewords can be quite revealing when it comes to the author's intentions for their review. National curriculums are very important. I to some extent, I do agree there does need to be a basic level when it comes to the national curriculum. The problem I have with national curriculums is that they tend to overreach. I think there should be national curriculums in core subjects, science, English, maths, possibly even history, well, as I say, we've had a national curriculum in all this stuff, and frankly I found my education to get much better when I started being more of an autodidact after uni. So they sought to ensure the curriculum is fit for the future, addresses the rich knowledge and skills young people need to thrive in our fast-changing world, and encourages a love of learning. Which, frankly, national curriculums are not very good at getting people to have a love of learning, at least in my experience from, early 2010s, late 2000s. There are many strengths in our existing curriculum and assessment arrangements. We have sought to build on these strengths, and in addition to identifying numerous opportunities for improvement, we've taken an evidence-led approach in diagnosing problems and their solutions. We've also been mindful of the importance of school curriculum beyond the national, and the important things that schools and colleges are providing to their students every day, enrichment activities, sports, etc, etc, etc. It is vital that schools and colleges are able to innovate and respond to local needs and teach some flexibility to extend the curriculum. I am quite glad to hear about that to some degree. School and teacher autonomy, I think, is quite important when it comes to kids' education, because not every child and classroom is the same. As such, we've been mindful to ensure the national curriculum comprises an aspirational entitlement for all, and there is adequate space for schools and colleges to go beyond. All subjects on the national curriculum are valuable, to different degrees, yes, and play an important role in preparing young children for life and work. We have sought to balance breadth with depth, ensuring all young people have access to a portfolio of crucial knowledge, balanced with a choice that facilitates a love of learning. We have also sought to ensure that these opportunities are open to all, so young people are not held back by background or circumstances. Which obviously, on the face of it, once again, that sounds like a noble goal, and then the Times is obviously saying, yes, but this means woke diversity, and that's where the problem comes in. Because I get the feeling history, for example, is going to focus massively on why the slave trade was bad, rather than actual important things such as, well, not necessarily that the morality of the slave trade isn't an important issue. It was at the time, and we found that actually the slave trade was bad after a couple of hundred years, before any other country, I might add. However, I think learning about prime ministers, kings, and the options that they went with at the time are more important than, say, the diet of a average chimney sweep orphan in Victorian London. Finally, there's a thank you to stakeholders who were consulted for the review, schools and colleges that hosted them, and children and young people, parents, carers, education staff, leaders, etc, 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 who responded to the call for evidence and participated in polling and attended events and roundtables. The passion and expertise has been enlightening, etc, etc, etc. There are many in our system striving to ensure that every young person has access to excellent education and develop a thirst for learning that will remain with them for life. My hope is that the recommendations contained in this report will take us a step closer towards this aspiration by building a world-class curriculum and assessment for all? Well, let's take a look at it. So now it's the executive summary, which ultimately is all you actually really need to read usually for these reports. They usually give the main thrusting points of the report. So the national curriculum is an investment in all young people for their benefit and benefit of the nation. Sure, education is inherently valuable and important for its own sake, but also plays a crucial role in supporting individual success, in providing young people with necessary knowledge and skills to build a prosperous economy and flourishing civil society, and in promoting social cohesion and democracy. That's where it starts to get a bit how much of this is actually about social engineering more than it is about actually giving young people skills for the future. Promoting social cohesion and democracy. Now, obviously, I'm all for promoting social cohesion. It's just usually when people in education say that, they mean we need more education on diversity, more Black Lives Matter stuff, etc., etc., etc. When it comes to democracy as well, I'd be interested to see how they teach things like the Brexit vote and things like that, which was the most democratic thing that has happened in Britain for some time, and yet it was still consistently attempted to be overturned. For these reasons, it is imperative that the national curriculum provide all children and young people with a rich, aspirational and challenging offer to support high and rising standards. So that's something to take away from this opening paragraph. They want to offer children not only high but also rising standards. That is what the point of this review is about, apparently. So as a defining feature, the review has been determinantly evidence-led. Our deliberations have been informed by robust research evidence, analysis of large-scale datasets, and a range of commission research and polling. We've drawn on a wealth of perspectives from experts, stakeholders, and the public, including over 7,000 responses to our call for evidence. Our work's been undertaken in close consultation with education professionals and other experts, parents, carers, children and young people, and wider stakeholders such as employers, universities and trade unions. I can already tell that this is not going to end well. Again, it's the typical thing of we are going to be looking at stated preferences rather than revealed preferences. It's kind of a garbage in, garbage out idea when it comes to statistics. The evidence that they are following is what people are stating they would prefer, rather than revealing what people actually prefer. Why, say, are people who have been educated in Britain deciding that they'd rather go elsewhere? Why, say, are people more choosing to go into STEM fields than humanities? Why are grades falling and rising in particular years? Things like that. No, instead, the call for evidence was effectively, we just want everyone to tell us what they'd prefer. And telling you what you'd prefer isn't necessarily the same as what is the best. People are very good at telling you what they would prefer, but ultimately, quite a lot of the time, and I think it especially happens in education, what people say they would prefer and what they actually gravitate towards in terms of, voting with their feet, so to speak, what subjects they choose, etc., tends to be quite a bit different, but, we'll see how this goes. So, towards a world-class curriculum and assessment system, this review represents an opportunity to build on what is working well and to address what is not, to ensure that the curriculum and assessment system in the country is truly world-class. That's a fine aspiration, and it's one that I want to. Let's see how you want to get toward that. In addition to refreshing the curriculum and ensuring that it reflects the knowledge and skills young people need to achieve and thrive, it's an opportunity to build excellence and support life chances. Oh, nearly said choices. It is essential that more children and young people build stronger foundations and a love of learning in the primary years, embarking on their secondary education with their literacy and numeracy secure, and with knowledge, confidence and enthusiasm sparked for other subjects. We must also facilitate more successful transitions to secondary education. Too many young people fall behind at this stage, so we must ensure that more of them maintain their momentum and enthusiasm across a rich and broad array of subjects. I'm quite surprised at that. From what I remember of going into secondary school, what it was you had all your entrance exams in January, or December, whenever, and then after that in year 6 it was effectively largely fun. I remember in my school it was a case of half the year was spent making a board game yourself, and obviously it went into a big competition at the end. Another thing we did was effectively read Harry Potter and make storyboards of it to basically learn how they made the films using storyboards, which was really good because that brought in English because you read Harry Potter. It brought in art because to make storyboards obviously you had to draw, and it could be as detailed or undetailed as you want. Some people literally did stick figures, other people, like me for instance, literally did as much detail as they could in each one. And then obviously making the board game brings in English because you have to write instructions, a lot of creativity, because obviously it could be as original as you wanted, or you could literally just copy snakes and ladders. I remember it being good fun. However, I can imagine a lot of people also did not find it easy to get back into a proper learning environment, so maybe that's what they're talking about, but, well, we might see. And finally, we must maintain the strong academic core for all that support life chances and ensure that more young people secure the expected standards in maths and English. However, we must also grasp the opportunity to ensure that more young people are able to choose qualifications that inspire them and which speak to their strengths and directions they wish to take. From my experience, most people manage to do that. You pick things that you like, and typically you like things because you're good at them. Why did I do maths, geology, and chemistry? Because I was good at all three. Why didn't I do English? I wasn't very good at it. Anyway, according to the interim report, apparently many aspects of the current system are actually working well. Okay. In comparison to other jurisdictions, we have reasonably broad and balanced curriculum to age 16, which offers all children an entitlement to a core set of knowledge. International comparison suggests that the present arrangement have had a positive impact on attainment, and we therefore intend to maintain and build on knowledge-rich approach and on the coherent structural architecture established by the last review. Okay, so actually the Tories were pretty good in education, which seems to be the one thing that they can actually defend, what they did with education, obviously outside of the COVID years. The present architecture of key stages is generally working well and we recommend retaining it. Likewise, our national assessment and qualifications are broadly working well. We therefore recommend that a majority of present framework arrangements and milestones of the curriculum and assessment remain. Oh, the review aims to have all these good things, and all these good things actually already kind of exist there. Am I surprised to hear that? I'm not entirely sure. I would still imagine that the history curriculum is still pretty bad, and when it comes to English, obviously, there's way too much American nonsense in there. However, our analysis has also identified many areas that need attention. This includes areas where we see significant opportunities and need for improvement, including making improvements to the curriculum and assessment in primary and secondary education, more extensive changes to 16 to 19 qualifications, which is where you do your A-levels and B-Techs. So where's the current system not working? The socio-economic gap in relation to education attainment remains stubbornly wide, and young people with special educational needs and disabilities make less progress than their peers. I would argue that's because the focus for the past decades, and I mean decades, has been on racial differences rather than socio-economic ones. It's been reported for absolutely ages that white working class boys do not get the help they need compared to the girls of the same socio-economic standing, and of course non-white people too. But guess who makes up the majority of the working class cohort? Oh, it's white people, and obviously half of them are boys, so it's no wonder that that gap's still wide. Whilst the explanations for this often lie outside the curriculum and assessment, the review has worked to ensure the system reflects high expectations for all and properly supports all young people's progress and achievement. Again, they have high expectations. Our recommendations aim to improve curriculum quality for all young people, but will particularly benefit those whom the system is currently not working well. We've also made recommendations to support better equity, access and inclusivity in subject areas where we have identified specific barriers to progress. In addition, we have sought to ensure that the curriculum and assessment are helpful to teachers in supporting progress, momentum, successful outcomes as learners move from one key stage to the next. So, obviously, there's a few buzzwords that a lot of right-wingers do not like. Equity, ugh. Inclusivity, what do you mean by that exactly? You can't just leave it at those words, because that could mean a lot of bad things, such as diversity quotas and different standards for different people, which would be absurd. We also highlight the role that other government agencies and bodies can play in exemplifying how to meet diverse needs and an inclusive mainstream school, and in good supporting good practice. Fine. So curriculum shape and challenges with specific subjects. Specific problems with content in some curriculum areas impede the quality of teaching and learning as well as pupil outcomes. There are tensions with curriculum breadth and depth, and consequently these present a challenge for school and colleges in meeting the important local needs and enrichment provisions which are highly valued by young people and parents and carers. Not sure what they mean by local needs there. I have a horrible feeling that means demography problems. The statutory guidance for the current national curriculum says that it is just one element in the education of every child. It was not intended to take up an entire school day. Okay, it is important that the national curriculum maintain its position as an ambitious entitlement for all. However, schools must have space to go beyond it to provide innovative practice, locally tailored content and enrichment activities that help ensure young people thrive in education and later life. Evidence supports the need to build secure foundations and mastery of key subjects, concepts to raise standards and enable development of expertise, but in some subjects the current construction and balance of content appears to be inhibiting this. This may impede mastery and prevent young people from developing an appropriate depth of understanding. I need details, this isn't giving me anything. The causes of the tension between breadth and depth are complex. We have therefore discussed these subject by subject. Getting this right will have a beneficial impact on the capacity of schools to make sure children and young people have access to a full range of subjects. Right, okay, so the details are all in the subjects, that's fine, I can skip to that. Many submissions to our call for evidence have argued for improvements in a range of curriculum subjects, some minor, some more significant, and we make recommendations to resolve the various subject-specific challenges. We have also taken steps to ensure the curriculum is inclusive so that all young people can see themselves represented. This should also help them broaden their horizons and better understand the perspective of others. That's the woke stuff. It's a massive problem you have because I'm very interested to see what history in this review has to say, because you can only imagine, and English actually, you can only imagine that it's effectively a stop teaching Shakespeare, stop teaching the Tudors, because instead we need to teach about Benjamin Zephaniah and Henry VIII's Black Trumpeter, things like that. I mean, that's obviously the worst faith interpretation, but I wouldn't be shocked if you see something along those lines. Over the last 2 decades, some subjects have thrived and seen increased take-up. In others, take-up has declined. The reasons are complicated, however, it's clear that English Baccalaureate performance measures have, to some degree, unnecessarily constrained student choice. This has affected their engagement and achievement and limited their access to and time available for arts and vocational subjects. We endorse the need for a broad and balanced academic curriculum up to 16 for all, but we also recognise the need for a better balance between entitlement and wider choice. We recommend the removal of English Baccalaureate measures, but the retention of the English Baccalaureate bucket in Progress 8 under the new title of Academic Breadth. So for those who don't know, and I didn't even know this, but the English Baccalaureate is effectively a school performance indicator that bases a school's performance based on grades within English language and English literature, maths, a combination of core sciences, biology, chemistry, physics, and even computer science apparently, and either modern or ancient foreign language, so Greek, ancient Greek, Latin, or French, Spanish, German, etc. And finally, geography or history. This explains why at GCSE you had to take English and maths, you got a choice of some of the sciences, you had to do a language, and you had to do geography or history. I never found this particularly bad. In fact, I think it's actually correct that all of these subjects have to be studied, and that is despite me absolutely despising English and really, really despising having to do a foreign language. Because the problem here seems to be that, you have to do, say, a modern language or sciences, and you may have absolutely no interest in these. What about people that want to do art and other vocational subjects, with the obvious answer being, well, how useful are these to everyday life? English and English literature makes sense. You need to know how to communicate to actually work. Maths makes sense. You will need to know basic arithmetic, and it helps with problem solving, of course, which obviously is massively helpful in future jobs. Sciences, same deal as maths. Languages, helps communicate with people all over the world, which is obviously useful because we live in a global world now. Geography or history, again, both relatively useful, but from my experience in geography, it was all right, but there was an awful lot of the social engineering that goes on, and the same thing with history, by the way. I mean, I asked one of my friends who did history at GCSE and A-level, what did you actually have to learn? And it was basically a range from Tudors to a whole bunch of mid-century, curricula, really. What happened in fascist Italy? What were the issues with Spanish succession? None of these people really know who Gladstone and Disraeli are, which I find absolutely incredible because they were probably the two most important prime ministers in, certainly Victorian history anyway. But you don't learn anything about that, or the significance of the British Empire beyond slavery. But I can't imagine recommendations to fix that will be here. So the curriculum needs to respond to social and technological change. Good God. In a world of rapid technological, environmental and social change, subject-specific knowledge remains the best investment. Being secure in core subjects like maths and science will remain pivotal for young people, now and in the future, as will their understanding of human culture through the humanities, language and arts. Human culture, interesting. Again, universal language there, with a bit of an assumption that all cultures are equal. Because, again, going back, there are only really two cultures you ever learned when it came to the core subjects, when it came to doing the GCSE prose for English literature. And it was, what was mine? Of Mice and Men, Merchants in Venice. And Merchants in Venice doesn't exactly show you Italian culture. It is, after all, a play written specifically for medieval audiences in London, maybe the rest of England as well, to be fair. And what made it universal was the fact it was written in English, and obviously, basically every country in the world speaks English. But then alternatively, you had Of Mice and Men, an American book that gives you specific American culture. I think it was in the South, to be fair. There was certainly enough racism in there. And on top of that, when we did Of Mice and Men, we also did A View from the Bridge, which also gives you specific American culture of Italian immigrants, again, in the early 20th century of America. That's basically all you learn in English. Early 20th century America plus Shakespeare. Though obviously I know people who did an inspector calls as well, and I believe there's issues with the way that is studied too, but I don't have experience there. But mostly what you would learn is, here's how masculinity is portrayed, here's a lot of ways in which it's bad, here's a few ways in which it's good, here's how women are seen as objects, here's why racism is bad, and here's why immigration is okay. For those of you who don't know, A View from the Bridge is all about basically a family dispute with Italians, and one of them calls on immigration, or ICE at the time, I suppose, when they shouldn't have. And it's bad enough to get him killed, spoiler. Additional knowledge and skills will be needed if we are to maximise young people's opportunities and equip them to meet challenges presented by our fast-changing world. The rise of AI and trends in digital information demand heightened media literacy and critical thinking, as well as digital skills. Digital skills, yes, I would argue that everyone should know how to use Excel. I was never really taught properly how to use Excel, and most of my skills come basically from my dad. Critical thinking, from people I know who went to Oxford, I don't think that's going to be very good. Media literacy is the biggest meme known to man. I can't believe that it's actually within a official government document, but there we go. All media literacy should mean is, can you read subtext? But that's not usually what people mean when they say media literacy. Media literacy seems to always come down to, here's what the author intended and therefore what you should read from it. Which is obviously silly, because at that point all reading comprehension becomes is, you should be told what this means. Likewise, global challenges, both social and environmental, require attention to scientific and cultural knowledge and skills. Okay, gonna be honest, not sure what's meant by that. I mean, when it comes to environmental, obviously that's climate change nonsense. I imagine we're going to get quite a bit of that. Cultural knowledge and skills, not entirely sure what that means. Need to know more. Young people and their parents or carers have been clear that they would like to see more applied knowledge in certain areas. That's one thing that I can actually agree with. We have examined the evidence to identify that the most in need of critical attention. These include areas mentioned above, plus important areas such as financial literacy and oracy. Sounds like they want more speech and drama. To be honest, it kind of annoys me when they say they want more financial literacy. All financial literacy is maths. You learn about compound interest. An awful lot of maths examples do use money. Alice has £5, her friend Bob has £2.50. How many apples can they buy if they're 50p each, etc.? The problem people really have with, I want this applied, is effectively when they come out of school, they effectively want a teacher to go through their finances with them. That's what people tend to mean here, but that's not the school's job. So this is a problem that I have. Yes, I agree there needs to be more applied cases of applying this knowledge, such as, say, within maths, and especially when it comes to geometry. However, when it comes to basic mental arithmetic, I think that's pretty well applied to real-life circumstances. We've recommended ways to make sure that these are properly incorporated into the curriculum through all key stages. Cool, let's move on. There's a note on 16 to 19 education, which again I believe is to do with A levels and what they have now, which is T levels, which I think are BTECs. What I find funny about this section is that A and T levels are good but not appropriate for all students because people may not have decided on a career path, so making a choice at this age is stupid. It's not, by the way, it helps you develop what you know you want to do. Others may already have decided on a career path that isn't covered by A and T levels, in which case I'd say leave school and go into the industry then. But that's not acceptable here because ultimately this is written by people who ultimately think people should be in education pretty much until they're 25. And I would say it is actually a fair criticism here to say that the pathway through A levels is not exactly clear as to what's best suited for certain employers and all that. So, reality of the situation here, by the way, is because A levels and T levels are literally just there to get you into university, and then obviously the pathway's much more obvious. There's also a recommendation to have a new pathway at level 3 alongside A and T levels for people who didn't do very well in maths and English at GCSE. So they also want V levels that effectively sort out all this. If you don't have a clear career pathway, you do a V level, God knows what subjects they actually include, they don't say here, but also it helps with people who didn't attain good GCSEs in maths and English. Which, to be honest with you, just being blunt here, it sounds like a place to throw everyone who is not particularly academically gifted. That seems to be what these V levels are. I would assume V level means vocation levels. Right, assessments. The reviewers sought to ensure that the assessment system captures the strengths of every young person and the breadth of the curriculum, and that has the right balance of assessment methods. The system must maintain the important role of exams, which are the fairest way of assessing students nationally, yes, true, and which mitigate the risks of assessment posed by generative AI, also true. At least they keep that in mind. We consider that the system is broadly working well and with an appropriate balance of formative, diagnostic and summative assessments, and we recommend retaining the broad thrust of existing arrangements. However, opportunities for improvement exist, such as improving the assessment of pupils writing at the end of Key Stage 2. We can support the transition into secondary education and students' progress in Key Stage 3, and more than maintain their momentum during the Key Stage and succeed at Key Stage 4. Okay. Especially critical at GCSE Maths and English, since the passports to further opportunities, and we therefore recommend developing diagnostic Maths and English tests to be taken in Year 8. The aim is to support teachers in identifying and remedying any problems before students progress to Key Stage 4. Okay, more assessments, doesn't seem too bad. England is by no means an international outlier in providing national exams at 16, and these remain important for discerning a route for 16 to 19. However, it's an outlier with regard to the volume of this assessment. The amount of time that young people spend in exams at Key Stage 4 has become excessive. We reject calls for campaigners to scrap exams at 16, however time spent on them at GCSE level should be reduced through a subject-by-subject approach where this can be done without materially affecting reliability and efficiency. Okay, that's a weird one. That's really weird. The assessment starts off by saying exams are basically the best way to assess people because obviously you do not have AI at all in the exam hall, and it is entirely down to what can the student do in this amount of time under time pressure. Answer this result. And then at the end they say, oh, it's excessive though, we need less exams. Don't get me wrong, I remember GCSE exam period. It was non-stop and quite stressful. Right, finally conclusions. All potential reforms to the curriculum and assessment come with trade-offs. Oh, well done. And it has been the job of the review to weigh up and manage these carefully, and we therefore considered an approach of evolution, not revolution, in our deliberations and recommendations. Honestly, not the worst thing in the world, because, as I say, the Tories did pretty good with education, about the only thing they did do pretty good with. Our recommendations follow extensive consideration, blah blah blah. Our approach has allowed us to navigate the diverse and often conflicting views that stakeholders have expressed. Many of the matters are extremely complex. Furthermore, some elements of the education system and other facts outside the scope of this review undoubtedly contribute to the outcomes we have observed. We've also sought to remain cognizant of the impact of substantial changes to the curriculum. So basically they're tinkering around the edges of the education system, which, to be honest with you, not the worst news in the world. And they have a full list of recommendations, which, yes, we are going to go through. This video is going to be over an hour. So first recommendation, introduce an ORAC framework to support practice and to complement the existing frameworks of reading and writing. In other words, English will expand on what you can read and what you can write about said reading. It will also involve, I would imagine, oral exams and assessments, which have for foreign languages as well, so why not have it for the English one? Principal recommendations: the refreshed national curriculum must be aspirational, engaging and demanding, offer that reflects the high expectations and excellence our young people deserve, irrespective of background. I have no idea what that recommendation actually means. The refreshed national curriculum should retain a knowledge-rich approach, ensuring skills are developed in conjunction with knowledge in ways that are appropriate for each subject discipline. Again, don't really know what they mean by that. We recommend that you teach in appropriate ways. Doesn't really say anything. The national curriculum should be constructed so that it supports children and young people to master core concepts, ensuring sufficient shape for them to build their knowledge and deepen their understanding. That makes sense, and we already do that, so that's fine. Curriculum coherence should be an organising principle for the curriculum drafters and support the selection and prioritisation of content where appropriate. Vertical core concepts on which the subject has been constructed should be clearly presented, and horizontal coherence should be ensured. I think effectively what they're trying to say there is that the core outcomes of what you should be learning in each subject should be clear, and how they actually relate to other subjects should be clear too. So let's say history and English. Learn about the times of Shakespeare to have an understanding of what Shakespeare was writing about and what audience he was writing for. Again, I don't think that's a bad idea, and it was kind of already happening when I was at school anyway. Foundation subject content should specify the essential substantive knowledge and skills which should be taught to enable children and young people to meet expectations at the end of each key stage. The refreshed national curriculum should ensure professional autonomy of teachers is maintained so that they can have flexibility to choose lesson content and how to teach it. Fine. National curriculum is for all our children and young people. As such, it should reflect our diverse society and the contributions of people of all backgrounds to our knowledge and culture, as if that's not already been happening to an extent that it in fact overrepresents them. Come on. I mean, seriously, I remember learning about Mahatma Gandhi and obviously Martin Luther King. Very worldwide examples. It rarely was there ever examples from Britain when it came to stuff like that. Nelson Mandela was brought up too, which, you know, apartheid in South Africa, yeah, bad. I think what I find most mad about these recommendations is that the only one that actually say make changes are make the curriculum more diverse. This is trying to say decolonise the curriculum without saying it, by the way. They know they can't use that term anymore, so now it's make it more diverse. So further recommendations on this: review and update all programmes of study and, where appropriate, the corresponding GCSE subject content to include stronger representation of the diversity that makes up our modern society, allowing more children to see themselves in the curriculum. Oh, what does that mean? I mean, as well, this is a Labour government. You know exactly what they are going to put in this. You know, this was a government who, when they were in opposition, were kneeling for George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. Although woke is largely being put away, you will still see government reports like this, and the government obviously reacting to implement it, because when it comes to putting diversity in our curriculum, that matters. When it comes to having a national inquiry into largely white English girls who were raped by largely foreign men, don't need to implement that properly, so yeah, expect the worst. Develops the national curriculum as a digital product that can support teachers to navigate content easily and to see and make connections across key stages and disciplines. Develops a programme of work to provide evidence-led guidance on curriculum and pedagogical adaptations, as well as exemplification for children and young people with SEND, including those in specialist provisions who experience various barriers to accessing the curriculum. In other words, even more obligations from councils to help SEND kids. Involve teachers in the testing and design of programmes of study as part of the drafting process. This must take into consideration the curriculum time that is available, ensuring the national curriculum is ambitious but teachable within a typical school timetable. In other words, teachers are at the front of what they are going to teach and how, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Right, we're now into subject-specific recommendations for pre-16 subjects, so in the interest of time, I'm only going to go through subjects that I deem, well, worthy of note. First of which is the citizenship recommendations. Introduce a statutory measure to ensure that all pupils are taught a core body of essential citizenship concept at primary, including element of financial and media literacy and climate change and sustainability. Excuse me? Now, I never had citizenship lessons when I was at school, so I can only assume that this is relatively new. But this education is to is supposed to help develop the necessary knowledge and skills to play a full and active role in society, and effectively it's supposed to let you know how democracy in this country, the government, and of course the law works, along with what responsibilities and rights you have as a subject of the crown. I'm afraid I do not see how financial and media literacy help with that, and I certainly don't see how climate change and sustainability help, unless it's the sort of thing of, put litter in the bin. I don't understand why that's being taught by schools, though. That was taught to me by, my parents. Improve the efficiency of primary citizenship by clarifying the purpose and content of Key Stage 1 and 2, and remove any content that duplicates the new relationship, sex and health education programme of study. That makes sense. Update the secondary programmes of study for citizenship to clarify their purpose and improve specificity to improve progression from Key Stage 3 or 4, including a renewed focus on financial literacy, media literacy, climate and sustainability, equality duties, and challenging discrimination and democracy in government. I hate to say this, but this sounds like please make spies of the children a la 1984. Again, financial literacy is just maths. That's all that is. You cover percentages in maths, which covers most of finance. Media literacy, frankly, is just English. Climate and sustainability, that comes under geography. Equality duties, I guess that's citizenship finally, but let's have a quick look at what that actually means. So when it comes to financial literacy, financial education should not be delayed until later life. Okay, well, I was told an awful lot about money about the age of 15. Research shows that children's habits and attitudes towards money develop at an early age, including their disposition to spend or save, and this underpins their financial capability in adulthood. As this critical time in their development, children are also increasingly making digital finance transactions themselves, making online purchases for those who are bought online, and have done so without adult supervision. Young people may also have to make significant financial decisions early on, such as deciding whether or not to apply for tuition fee loans. It's so student-sided, they'd be stupid not to. In addition, the likelihood that children and young people receive meaningful financial education at home varies according to their background. I'm not being funny, but when it comes to adulthood, people do not understand student loans either, so this is an issue we are seeing later in life too, because everyone seems to think that students are hard done by student loans. They're not. They're ridiculously student-sided. You only pay them off when you can actually afford to through your income, i.e. you have to be above a threshold, and everyone's like, oh, but the inflation's going up quicker than the threshold. Well, at least the thresholds are going up. That's more than you can say for any other form of income tax. On top of that, it's written off when you're 56. And so, yeah, you could be hundreds of thousands in debt and it's just written off and then subsidised by the taxpayer. It really doesn't matter. So the recommendations of this is that all children should have access to financial education, other critical elements of the citizenship curriculum within primary education onwards, and recommend making citizenship part of the national curriculum at Key Stage 1 and 2, so it seems to have been optional before that. We also note the value of further exemplifying the effective teaching of financial literacy through resources as those created by Oak National Academy. I'm pretty sure I've gone through them before, and that was one of the wokest things I've seen in my life. At 16 to 19, we heard positive examples of developing financial literacy as part of the non-qualification activity element of Learning Study programme, including initiatives delivered in collaboration with employers. Good practice like this should be encouraged. Fine. I still don't really understand what financial literacy means here, though. What's going to be taught? Compound interest, mortgages? What? I can barely find any more detail than that when it comes to this review. Right, we may as well go through all these concepts. So next is digital literacy. So the review identifies computing as a primary subject to deliver digital literacy content and recommends that it provides greater clarity on what should be taught at each key stage. To ensure students build essential digital competencies for life and work, the recommendations applies to all key stages, but particularly important at stage 4, where computer programme of study presently consists of just 3 bullet points. We recommend broadening the GCSE to incorporate the full breadth of computing curriculum, while other subjects should be enriching through thoughtful use of digital tech, such as 3D modelling and design and tech, and using the geographical information system in geography, and the foundations must be developed through computing. I'm actually pretty happy with all that, to be honest with you. Using Blender for DT could be very useful. I certainly will have enjoyed that sort of thing. Geographical information systems, I assume that's just using digital assets for mapping and looking at maps and things like that. That could be very useful. I mean, beyond Google Earth, by the way. But I'm pretty annoyed that it's not being brought in with financial literacy when it comes to Excel. That doesn't seem to be part of this. Responsible technology use and awareness of online harms and safety should be addressed in RSHE, health education, where young people explore the social, emotional and ethical dimensions of digital life. We even had that at my age, and from what I understand, it's always about 5 years behind where the kids are actually at. We also recommend that these topics be reinforced in computing, giving it a central role in digital literacy, critical evaluation of online content, essential for navigating misinformation and disinformation, and should be covered in citizenship. See also media literacy, which we will do in a sec. Support teachers, optional resources are available on Oak National Academy and other providers. However, safeguarding young people in a digital world demands clear, consistent and compulsory coverage across the curriculum. Again, it's not that it's not going to be useful, it's just that the usefulness is going to be very limited, because typically, these reviews take a year, and already in that time, the way the digital and social media world operate has changed massively. It basically changes with each election cycle in America and the UK, which obviously we've had over the past year. So now we're on to media literacy. Some subjects such as history and science already support the development of critical analysis, which underpins media literacy. In history, students learn through the process of historical analysis to assess separate information sources while accounting for bias, reliability, perspective and inaccuracies. Fine. In science, students are similarly taught to critically and empirically evaluate scientific claims. These processes are essential for encouraging the investigative process, which underpins media literacy, and teachers should be encouraged to make these links. Okay, so media literacy in this context just means critical evaluation. Please don't call it media literacy, it is a meme. The national curriculum also has some direct media literacy coverage in citizenship. Man, citizenship's massive. RHSE, computing and English, and in the optional GCSE media studies. Well, I suppose that makes sense. Together, these subjects aim to equip children and young people with the knowledge and skills required to become discerning consumers of media and to use information and communication technology creatively, purposefully and critically. Yet this coverage could be strengthened to empower young people to engage critically with the messages they encounter through different media channels. The review recommends that the government strengthens the role of media literacy in English and citizenship. Good lord. We recommend that the nature and expression of emotive language be explored so students can understand the various ways in which language can be used to persuade, and that GCSE English language include analysis of multimodal and ephemeral text types. Media literacy should be better specified in both the primary and secondary citizenship curriculum. This citizenship should be added to the national curriculum at stage 1 and 2. This coordinated approach will ensure young people are equipped with knowledge and skills needed to discern and critically engage with all forms of media. So, worst case scenario here, effectively what starts happening is that media literacy just starts meaning, how can I discount pieces of information due to their sources? Which, by the way, can be valid in certain circumstances. It's just the problem is that obviously, let's take climate change as an example. We had that going on for years, and now it turns out Bill Gates is saying, okay, maybe humanity isn't going to die because of climate change, which is what an awful lot of skeptics were saying, but you call them climate skeptics and you can just discount the information that they had, despite the fact that an awful lot of it may have been true. And this curriculum doesn't appear to deal with that. In fact, it's going to strengthen exactly what is going on there, because I was going to go through in more detail, but I'm not going to have time now. But Becky Francis, who actually wrote this, is an educationalist who specialised in inequalities. And the thing is, again, this is a person who is a credentialist and effectively believes that going through school and getting your credentials does show signs of intelligence and therefore makes you trustworthy. And therefore she's obviously going to reinforce that outlook when it comes to the curriculum. Trust the experts, etc, 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 which, don't get me wrong, experts have an awful lot of important things to say. But I'm sorry, an awful lot of the time, they also have completely wrong conclusions. And media literacy, I'm afraid, is just entrenching the problems that we have at the moment. They're not teaching you to critically think, they're teaching you to just listen and believe. Right, next up, my favourite subject. There is currently minimal explicit inclusion of climate education in the national curriculum. That's probably a good thing. For example, there are only limited references to climate science and scientific work to combat climate change in the science curriculum. think it's mostly in chemistry, that as well. While climate change is not explicitly included in the purpose of study for geography. To be fair with you, I'm shocked at that, because I thought it already would be, and it makes sense in geography at the very least. There are also no statutory requirements to teach climate education in Key Stage 1 or 2 beyond a non-statutory reference in citizenship. Why is it only there? Whilst there is some climate education at later stages in the programme for study of geography and science, the depth of content is either minimal or out of date and therefore needs refreshing, in that, it's not going to kill humanity, I imagine, is what she means there, totally. D&T has no focus on sustainability despite the importance of material choice and renewable supply chains in this subject. Good God. This is how you kill people's interest in subjects. Teachers have said the lack of visibility and emphasis on climate education within the national curriculum is a barrier to creating an effective curriculum on climate education. Yeah, this is where I have a massive problem with stated versus revealed preferences. Revealed preference, nobody actually cares about the environment. All of these teachers will have plastic cups that they get their Starbucks in. But stated preference, I want all my kids to believe that they should only be allowed to have paper straws. Goodness me. I mean, seriously, notice that it was only teachers who brought that up. It wasn't even stakeholders, it wasn't trade unions, it wasn't employees, it wasn't even the pupils. It was just the teachers that have been referenced there. That's maddening. And again, you're going to get that because an awful lot of teachers are remarkably left-wing. Climate education is critically important to the economy and for providing learners with the knowledge they need for future works. The solution to the climate crisis requires an expansion of green technology, and this in turn is creating new industries and jobs and affecting nearly all sectors of the economy. Yeah, I'm not being funny, but that's coming to a screeching halt in the next 5 years. If young people are to make the most of these opportunities, it's crucial they acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to do so. For those interested in it, sure, but people who are planning to, say, become historians really do not need to know anything about the climate crisis, really. Maybe they might need to know about climate change to understand why we could grow grapes in Roman times in Britain. But they're not going to need to understand gear ratios and how massive transformers are needed to make sure that wind energy can be transferred to the grid. Young people have been clear about their desire for a greater focus on this area in their education. Okay, so it is young people as well as teachers, as it turns out. As well as being a common theme in our engagement with young people, polling emphasises a level of concern and significant appetite for further information on climate change and climate science, including a desire to support solutions. This is mad to me, because what that is screaming to me is that they're actually being overtaught this by teachers who want to teach it. Why does it need to be in the national curriculum if it's already in there? We therefore make recommendations to bolster the presence of climate education and sustainability in the science and geography curricula. At least that's the two places it makes sense, I will say that. And that's where I learned it too. And emphasise sustainability in D&T. Recommendations for earlier sequencing and refreshed content are set out in relevant chapters in the report focusing on geography, D&T and science. It is important to note that the curriculum content is only one part of the issue. Pedagogology has an important role in applying engaging climate lens to existing curriculum content. My goodness. The review has seen an excellent example of individual schools and teachers showing leadership in this area, and that's to be encouraged. This is what I mean. This stuff's already happening. They now just want to put it in the official curriculum. So while I'm going mad at it, I shouldn't really, because all this is doing is just officially putting it in documents of what's already being taught anyway. I will go to the curriculum recommendations after this, because at the moment, it's a bit of a hodgepodge of how I'm going through this, but I am going to finish off these direct recommendations. Finally, it's oracy, which, as I've already said, I'm quite impressed with anyway. I would be happy with more drama, as is recommended here, for speaking and listening exams and assessments. But for some reason, citizenship's brought up again. We recommend greater specificity in oracy with both primary and secondary curriculum. More widely, we recommend the introduction of a new oracy framework to support good practice. Recommendations are intended to secure an improved oracy offer to ensure young people benefit from a skill that will help them in every stage of their lives, and that's definitely true. But citizenship just seems to be the subject they throw everything they deem important at, no matter how much they fit together. Like, why are you putting oracy, media literacy, and climate change all in the same subject in citizenship? That's what's going on there. Sorry, citizenship to me should be about How does the government work? How does voting work? What do paying taxes go towards? That would be an important one, because every kid needs to know about how ridiculous the tax and spend system is. And they seem to want to put less emphasis on that and instead talk about how can you speak about the climate more. That's what I'm getting from this, and it seems ridiculous. The final thing to quickly go through here is a curriculum for all. The national curriculum is for all our children and young people, and they should feel included and represented by it. It's intrinsically important, but also supports engagement and ensures that all young people are exposed to a wide range of perspectives that serve to broaden their horizons rather than limiting them to narrow frames of reference based on their background. Which is odd to me, because how do you even manage that? If you're in a classroom and you're teaching, I don't know, John Lennon's been taught in history classes, for God's sake. I don't understand how, say, a boy of Jamaican ancestry is narrowed down to only learning about Jamaica. I've not heard of that before. The review will seek to deliver a curriculum that reflects this issue, and while the national curriculum already offers flexibility for teachers to integrate inclusive and diverse learning experiences, we've heard that more needs to be done to ensure that all young people feel represented. In our call to evidence, we identified opportunities to broaden representation in relation to protected characteristics and socio-economic backgrounds across many subjects. In art and design, research shows that works by minority ethnic artists are rarely used, despite the subject's potential to reflect Britain's cultural diversity and contribution to the discipline. English, the curriculum allows for a range of texts. We've heard that in practice, selection often lack breadth, shaped by limited availability of resources and tendency to rely on well-established works. I wonder why they're well-established. Likewise, we've heard that drama and dance work need to broaden the range of creators, performers, styles, and genres studied. In history, teachers call for a clearer guidance to help reflect the subject's inherent diversity without replacing core content. In music, stakeholders noted that terminology and assessment criteria can limit the inclusion of diverse genres and styles. We recommend updating subject content and programs of study to reflect a broader range of perspective and experiences, while retaining foundational disciplinary knowledge. Core knowledge and key works that shape the subject must remain central. However, we are clear that diverse contributions to subject disciplines enable a complete, broad and balanced curriculum. I mean, again, this all just looks like decolonise the curriculum. You are choosing too many white people, please stop doing that. Again, Oak National Academy is brought up yet again. That's an academy that was effectively funded by the government to help resource parents to teach their kids during the pandemic, and it seems to have grown from there. And as I say, I've been through their stuff before, and it was remarkably woke. More woke than what's going on here, but again, they're getting better at trying to hide this woke nonsense, but it's still propped up absolutely everywhere here. Anyway, the recommendation includes strong representation of the diversity that makes up modern society in basically all subjects. Yeah, decolonise the curriculum. Right, I would say we have pretty much nailed everything that, well, is important within this review. The curriculum effectively is, most of this is good, exams are very, very good, but we need less of them. Keep all the stuff that seems to be working and people like, yeah, that's very good, but the problem is just because people don't like something doesn't mean you need to get rid of it. This is the reason that they are moving more to assessments rather than to exams, because obviously students prefer it because there's less stress, and teachers prefer it because a lot of them are leftists. Send kids and working class kids need more help. We've always said that, but details on that aren't really in this report. And then basically everything that is cringe is being focused on. Now, to be fair, financial literacy I'm not necessarily against. It's just the problem with that is that people are already taught financial literacy in maths, they just don't apply it properly. And that there's a problem there in that why aren't they applying it properly? Well, maybe try it in the citizenship subject, and yeah, maybe that will help. But that also includes absolutely everything else that they care about. Climate change. Why is that in citizenship? Again, less focus is being put on things that I really think people need to know about, such as how the government, our system, democracy and tax and law and all that work. And instead it's moved to how do we have a sustainable future? Well, you see these bottle caps that everyone hates that attach to the top of plastic bottles? Yeah, you need them forever, and throw your rubbish away, what have you. Science and geography now explicitly have to include an awful lot of climate change MacGuffin stuff. Problem with that you're going to run into is that the science is quite quickly changing on all that. I mean, when Bill Gates comes out to say climate change isn't going to kill everyone, you know a vibe has shifted and there is actually a need to catch up. So that's going to be pointless in a few years, because I think the Tories knew that that was a moral panic, but they let teachers moral panic about it anyway, and that's why you end up with a load of kids skiving school to go to protests. So anyway, that's now officially in the curriculum. Media literacy basically just seems to be, how can you dismiss information that's not from experts? That's not particularly useful in this day and age, because experts keep getting things wrong. Big thing, immigration and all that. Diversity in the curriculum just seems to be decolonise the curriculum. You know, we're in Britain, learn about British history, British literature, get the American stuff largely out, please. But there's nothing like that. In fact, if anything, this is Americanise the curriculum a little more. So I suppose with that, this could have been a much worse result, but you kind of got the baseline 2022 leftism, I guess 2018 more than anything leftism, that you would expect in things like this. On the bright side, I can say that at least this will more than likely be re-reviewed by a reform government at the latest in 2029, so at least we got that going for us. But what else did you expect? Right, with that, I think that covers pretty much everything. So if you enjoy what I do, please do subscribe, leave a like, leave a comment. Also, you can become a channel member, leave super chats, super thanks. Tonight, I will be playing Deus Ex Human Revolution. Friday, there will be Wolves of Westminster podcast out. I will also be on Friday night on that Crime Guy's channel doing another quiz. I believe he's doing one based on JF Garape, so I can't wait to laugh at another lolcow. Tosh Talks next Tuesday. Right, videos out as and when I can make them. Thank you all very much for watching, and once again, until next time, goodbye.